when I'm, it's rare that I'm recording audio, although I guess,
When mixing, if you find you have some
well, there are plugins that are like declick plugins.
oh really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. DS or declicker. Yeah, through. You familiar with the company Isotope? Spelled with a Z I Z O T O P E.
They
Very high quality stuff and not outrageously priced, but they have a set I think that's like the D clicker, DS or D whatever, and you can get that for a couple $100, and that gives you I think the ability to do that. Yeah,
how about when you need one of the voices that the mix is wrong originally,
uh,
and you need the soloist was not given
uh,
a chance to
I,
because they're
I guess the question is, do you have feeds of on
not
different?
really
Yeah, if it's all on one
right.
thing, at best maybe you could EQ it, but you're pretty much stuck in a case
You're
like
pretty
that.
much stuck.
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that of course was the benefit of multi-track recording is that you could move individual
Right.
things up and down. Prior to that, you either nailed it or you didn't. So
Okay. Okay. We're live.
we're in G though for sure. So. Pennies in the stream. Little things of moonlight in Vermont. Bend in the rough. Swift current.
Okay.
So, I see. That gives us a chance to see what we look like. Uh, okay.
Okay. We'll play it by ear.
So, Julie, what I'm seeing on the screen right now is about 30 seconds ago. Okay, so that I don't know
That's
how
why you
much.
can't watch live.
Yeah,
You're
I
always
see.
going to see,
right.
it's
Plus,
actually a 3 second delay.
oh, more than
That's
that.
all?
Yes,
No.
it's way
Well,
more than.
it's right now, it's normal latency. I don't have it set to
I see.
low latency.
I see.
Yeah.
30 seconds, yeah.
And I can pause it, and it's on DVR, so I can play
Okay.
it back. But now you guys can see it works. So we've
Oh,
got
okay.
each and every component.
Okay.
Now the only thing to do is to do a dry run. You
Okay.
don't have to say everything you're intending
No,
to
no,
say,
no, no.
Right.
but we're going to do it so that you guys can see how it's going to look.
Great. Okay.
I mean, Steven helps, trust me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're kidding.
But oh my goodness.
I know how this
All right, so
Yeah.
is frustrating. And you have to tell me if I have to, which one is the one that I have to re-export in high definition.
I will. That's not on the top priority at the
Right.
moment. Right now is just to try
That's
to
just a
see what you
moment.
guys. Don't worry about what you see here,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll see it switch back and forth. So I think what's a good idea also for the OBS is to have the countdown, but I don't have that countdown with me right now.
Okay.
I'll have to create it.
Right. So, Julie, what's the benefit of us seeing half a minute ago on the screen? That to me is.
I'm telling you, all you're going to see right now is that it's changing from, it's all you're going to see right now is what they see, and they're seeing 3 to 5 seconds ago.
I guess my point. My
Well,
point.
is
what
why
this
do
is
we want
for
Yeah.
is so that you can see that it's working. That's
Oh,
it.
that's all. Okay.
I.
So remember you said you wanted a live monitor to see what's going on? This is all I can do for you right now.
Okay. So.
We shouldn't.
Yeah, I would be far better off not seeing it
Yeah,
because it's
true.
extremely.
This is just a dry run. Don't worry about what you're saying because I turned off the audio.
Can you put it so I don't see it? It's extremely distracting to have it be what happened
This is
half a
only
minute.
so that you can see that
I-
it's playing live.
Great. You if something happens that it's not playing live, you stop it and tell us or whatever. But yeah, no, it's just because I
It's
was.
hard. It's hard to watch yourself a few seconds ago.
Yeah, it throws it off.
Have you ever
All
like?
you have to do is look at this camera.
Right. Okay.
Just focus on that when you're talking to them.
Okay.
Focus on each other when you're talking to each other.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna start from the top. I'm gonna.
Okay. And again, this thing has tilted. I assume I'm gonna have it here. I just have a feeling it's.
Have you noticed if it tilts to the right or to the left?
It.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
I'm
Right.
just
Oh,
saying.
that's.
I'm just saying.
There's a tilt to everything here. Yeah, the other thing is that this table occasionally shifts.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Okay.
start recording for the OBS. At least that way, that's what we're gonna practice based on. So we're starting the recording now, and start with your introduction.
Hello, my name is Sergio Barrer, and next to me is my friend Bob Remstein, and we're gonna be hosting this live stream of the concert that happened a couple of months ago of the Nightmare and the Dream. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Good, Sergio. How are you doing? This is kind of an exciting moment because not only is the piece something that I think a lot of people really need to find out more about, but we finally get a chance to go back and kind of revisit it.
Right. No, I'm very excited also because a lot of things happened during this project, from the writing to all the rehearsal things to all the performance things that happen, and it's nice to be able to share it with everybody.
Yeah.
You know, just on the composing part, there is quite a bit that I can share, but there is so much more about how the choir worked together, and you were the rehearsal, pianist for the whole thing.
Yeah.
So you must have a couple of stories to tell.
No doubt. I mean, I guess in some regards, you really have to start with the sheer scope of the piece. Besides its length, its 5 movements and so forth, this is an extremely ambitious work. We're telling, in effect, the story of the concept behind and ultimately the delivery of the birth of the State of Israel. And Sergio has not only got a full choir a fairly good-sized instrumental group and various soloists, but it also is done in several languages.
Yeah, I had to go back to the Middle Ages and put the clash of the cultures at the very beginning, and so to highlight it, I put the Christian culture being spoken in Latin,
Mm.
and the Jewish culture being done in Hebrew.
Oh,
I put the man as a, because also it's in a Gregorian chant style,
right, right.
and then the women are singing in a cantorial style.
Mm.
My friend, I have to acknowledge, Jay Horwith,
Yeah.
gave me the how the second commandment is sung in synagogue, and I use that as the melody for
Interesting.
the woman.
Oh.
At the very beginning, and so you have the clash of the cultures, and then you get into when the clash went beyond words and concepts, like into the Inquisition,
Yeah.
when it got really physical. And some people, it had to be there. I there was it highlights the need for the birth of the state of Israel.
Yeah, there's an enormous amount of history that uh, led up to it. But as you say, especially going all the way back to the Middle Ages, there is always a clash and a real disconnect between the Christian world and the Jewish world. And the Jews, it took quite a long time not just to think about how to create our own state, but to make it come about. It required not just doing it within that community, but finding a way to create it within the context of the whole world.
Yeah, I it is it is very interesting how the Jewish community had to live in exile as a minority for thousands of years.
Yeah.
That's the thing. When you're a minority, you are subject to the whims of the majority. And so this highlights the first movement, Europa, highlights that situation in Europe, particularly from the monks, the Gregorian chant, going through the Inquisition and the expulsion of the Jews from Spain,
Mhm.
which was a big deal. And we do that in Spanish with the original text
Mhm.
of the expulsion
Right.
declaration.
Yeah.
And then the way I finish it is with the Book of Lamentations,
Mhm.
because the Book of Lamentations was written after the fall of the first temple.
Mhm.
And so there is this grief pouring from the soul of the Jewish people that are now in Babylon. And but I put everybody singing it. It's both in the Christian and the Jewish Bible, and it's after all this conflict, after all this, everybody's trying to get God to listen and to repair this harm that has been done. And so we have this repentance at the end, where you had before the Jews and the Christians singing different things. Now it's all together, and we're just looking for reconciliation. And that's the ending tone of the whole first movement.
So ultimately, it goes from differences and conflict to a form of resolution. And in some ways, the complexity of that first movement is amazing. It really sets up all of what is going to happen as the piece goes on. Should we listen to it?
Yeah, let's do that. was the ending. I think, as you said, it sets up what's coming up next.
Yeah, yeah. And so now with the second movement, we get to meet our protagonist, Herzl, and we start finding out the setting, the time and place where he begins his whole process, and something about him. He's somebody who clearly had a lot of interest in a lot of different areas. He was kind of a multi-talent, but it was the dark side of that world and that era that really motivated him to do something.
Yeah. No, I used the diaries of Herzl.
Mhm.
It's interesting in the whole piece. If you are familiar with the story, uh, in 1995 there was a trial of a Jewish officer in France, and he was condemned because he was basically Jewish, and
The
the Dreyfus affair. But Herzl started keeping diaries in 1896,
Mm.
1 year afterwards, and in all his diaries he didn't mention the Dreyfus affair, but he mentioned all the things that I put in the second movement.
Uh-huh.
So I said, okay, if he doesn't mention it, there was a new biography that I read about him that talked about this and says, why do we attribute so much power to the Dreyfus affair when he doesn't mention it in his diaries? And maybe it was written in an article by him that was addressed to the Jewish community in America. And he said, well, maybe it was to a degree it affected him, but when he starts putting all these thoughts into his diaries, which are 5 volumes,
Right.
there is not one mention of it. So it kind of belongs separately than what I did, you know.
Okay.
Some people told me, why didn't you mention that? And I said, that's the reason, because it was in the diaries. There is a new biography that made a point of bringing that up, that it is not in the diaries. And but the anti-Semitic writings and everything that we explore in this movement are part of the diaries. They are definitely mentioned by him, and it's when we start, we go into a totally different mood.
Yeah, and that comes across immediately because basically it's in 3. It starts in
Right.
a major key, and the narrator speaks about Vienna and so forth.
Right.
Really, so it's, to the average person, it's like, waltzes, Vienna,
Right.
lovely, let's go have some dessert. But again, we need to find out, and we do find out right away, this dark side was very present. And as you begin pointing out, and as the piece goes on, we find out about some nasty writings that
Right.
were there, and one can't ignore them. And Herzl clearly didn't ignore them. He felt he motivated to take action.
Right. Right. And it's actually a waltz. I wrote a waltz.
Yeah, of course, right.
In 3.
Uh,
You start hearing this waltz while the narrator starts speaking. And yeah, I wanted to leave all this heaviness behind because this is gonna be different.
right.
And I find that the first movement was also the harder to rehearse in some aspects.
Yeah.
You know, the music has. I actually had to modify a couple of things there that now, in a score sometimes you have to put another version for a time that, it's called anosia. It's called
Right,
and
sure.
some of my original thoughts ended up as osias. If you can do this, you can handle this, because they were very difficult to perform, and we said, with the time we have, we're gonna have to focus on the whole thing. So
Well, I mean, the piece, as we've already mentioned, 5 movements. It's lengthy, it's complicated, and we had a number of different musical forces at work who weren't always there at every rehearsal. There was no way it could happen. The
Right.
instrumentalists were only there at the last few. So clearly, part of the issue was dictated by practical concerns.
Right. Yeah. In the end, you ended up playing in the concert for the choir only.
Right. Yeah.
You know, this is interesting. I think
Yeah.
you should.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because you initially had me as strictly as a rehearsal pianist, and yeah, part of it again was to keep the choir on track, given that they are singing throughout almost all of it, and it's a complicated piece. So I think the result bore out in a way that I think is what you wanted, which was to be able to get that clarity.
Right. I Yeah, it did work, and you can, if you pay attention in the third movement, you can sort of hear in the background a little bit the piano, but it's almost invisible.
Hmm.
It took some trickery to get it totally out, because the recording the recording scene is, we had speakers on the back of the choir, so on every mic that we had, all the sound came in.
Yeah.
So on every track you could hear the choir and the instruments and everything with something a little bit more than that. So it took quite a bit of work to get it to work in that space because of the setup.
Oh.
You don't
Yeah,
choose those
don't
things.
try
Anyway.
this at home, folks.
Anyway, but we should hear the
Yeah, let's get the narrative and the story going and find out something about Herzl and how he got his start.
Vienna, capital of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, cultural center of Europe, home of Mahler, Brahms, Klimt, the Strausses, liberalism, and one Theodor Herzl. He was born in Budapest in 1860, but in 1878 the family moved to Vienna, where, after studying law, Herzl decided to become a playwright and then a journalist. He loved German culture and wanted to be a part of it. But Vienna had a dark side. It harbored anti-Semitism, and that force, more than anything else, would end up shaping Herzl's life.
Okay. All right. Okay. I can. Yeah. So we end up at the point where Herzl is gonna publish his first book about the Jewish situation, called The Jewish State. It was a pamphlet about how he planned to establish the state of Israel and what the evolution is. There is some things that I couldn't mention in the work because of the length.
Yeah, sure.
One of the interesting things about the whole project that Herzl had in mind is that it had to be done fast and all together. He wanted a huge movement from all the Jewish communities to just go and settle in a few years, and that's it.
Wow.
And he said, if not, we're gonna start seeing opposition to our movement. We're gonna start seeing it.
Wow.
And there was no agreement to do this. Rothschild, the French, as we saw, the British, they all were getting pretty comfortable there. Some visionaries like Herzl said, no, it's not gonna stand, it's not gonna be this nice.
Yeah.
But most of the people said, well, now we're here, we're okay. They let us go to universities, they let us have posts.
Right.
We are integrating into European society, and we have. And so he was right. He was saying we have to do it fast. We have to do it, or we're gonna fight his opposition. It's gonna happen.
I mean, he really was a visionary, and you have to admit that's an extremely ambitious idea. I mean, even if you take the specifics out of it, you're talking about any group of people trying to establish a state and trying to coordinate it. That's an extremely,
Yeah.
an amazing task to try and pull off.
Yeah, one has to understand that the whole Zionist project was 8 years of Herzl's life. That's it, from 36 to 44. Before that, he was writing plays, he was doing other things, and writing travelogue for a newspaper in Vienna. But I mean, come on, 8 years, and he talked with. In the next couple of movements, we're gonna see his vision. The next movement is about his plan, and then how he saw it ending.
Yeah.
You know, the first 2 minutes are exactly the sequence of actions, and the next 5 are how it should end up, and what would happen to the people, and how it would end being a liberal country. His idea of a liberal country, what would develop, but it's and then following that, we'll see all the people that he talked to and all the things he did in 8 years, and it's hard to imagine. In that time where you had to travel in trains and in horses, horseback, and in ships that were not very fast, and it was 3 weeks to go to London, and then 2 weeks to go here, and then being on trains and stuff. It's like, really.
It's hard to imagine, even in recent years, pulling off something as ambitious as all that. But as you point out, considering you could only move as slowly as all that, to get that sort of thing happening in that time period is even more astonishing.
Yeah. I think Herzl is the personification of the Jewish value of chutzpah. I mean, nobody appointed him as anything.
Yeah.
He just took it on as himself. And how many people do that? I think my people need this. I'm going to do this. And spend 8 years talking with heads of state and
But that sort of thing, philosophers and visionaries, they stand apart from the rest of the crowd. It actually brings to mind, I don't know if I want to go into this too much, it brings to mind someone like Thomas Paine in terms of, what he put out in a couple of pamphlets that coordinated a lot of the forethought of the founding of America too. So,
yeah, you need a goal maker. You need someone that puts the goals there and that has the vision. And usually, they are not the people that end up realizing the vision.
Right.
There's two different things.
Yeah, by the way, I feel like we have to mention here and give some thanks and applause to Marcus Feldman, the cantor, who is the singer doing the solos of Herzl, and his part was by no means a snap of the fingers, and he pulled it off beautifully.
Yeah, it was nice also to go to rehearsals with him and see the part grow and grow and grow, and then at the end how he really wore it as a role, even when he was off singing, you could and the camera stayed on him. You said he was still there.
Yeah,
he was still doing it, and he felt the role of Herzl.
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't have asked for anything better. I mean, that he really was one of the highlights of the whole production, because he felt it, and when he says at the end of the second movement, I had to do something for the Jews, he really, you could see him just coming to him and doing.
So now we get the third movement, where in effect the process of him trying to make it happen and his plan begin to be explained and portrayed.
Right. Yeah. As I said, the first 2 minutes are the plan, and then we go into his vision. His vision is outlined in a novel called Old New Land, and it's a novel, and it's a novel that happened in the future,
Ah.
and that's where I got all this material from. So let's hear it.
The Jewish state was published in 1896. It was a plan of action to establish the Jewish state. In 1902, Old New Land appeared in bookstores. That novel took us to an already established Jewish state, as imagined by Herzl. Let us revisit Herzl's plan and vision.
The plan is simple. And the sovereignty over a portion of the globe, large enough to support a nation. The rest we shall manage for ourselves. The society of Jews will learn in the fields of politics and science, and the company of Jews will sell the assets of those departing by organizing commerce and trade in our new home. The poor will go first to cultivate the soil. They will build roads and bridges, railways and telegraphs, regulate rivers. They will build their own and labor will create trade, will create markets, and markets will attract new settlers. The creation of our state will benefit adjacent countries and a generation.
Before we get into some of the description of the fourth movement, which was in many ways the most complex, I think it is important to point out here that, this performance by the San Fernando Valley Master Chorale, and who, it's not as though every singing group either will do a dynamic and original piece like this or has the capacity to do it. We have to give thanks to the fabulous director of the group, Charlie Kim, who is, to me, a rare individual who has the ability to do all this stuff without ever getting upset with anybody. I don't know.
I've never seen him angry.
No.
You're right.
Yeah. And the thing is, this group does all this work and should be supported by the community. I think we are to a certain extent already, but part of the reason why we are doing this podcast is to encourage anyone watching and anyone who is already there at the concert or might be likely to come to future ones to support this group. This group needs to be supported to not only do what we already do, but to do even more ambitious works in the future.
I totally agree. It's a pleasure to work with a group, and we have to be aware that unfortunately nothing works in this world without the support of our listeners.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up. And and I want to say a couple of things about Charlie.
Hmm.
Uh, you have seen him already there in the video. There is quite a few takes on him, and one of the things that I admire from the choir and from the director is that there are moments there that it's like one person, like the choir and the director are totally in sync, and I love to see that happen because it doesn't happen every time. It doesn't happen with every conductor. I know conductors that uh, they couldn't do this. It doesn't happen,
Right.
and so when everybody gets so into it that it's just happening together, the the people that are in the public know that.
Yeah. And to be able to combine both that level of expertise with also the sheer joy and enthusiasm that he brings, that translates from the director to the choir itself, and the results speak for themselves. You get something of a high level that's not merely to be praised, but also to be enjoyed.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we want to thank Charlie very much and for all his contribution to this. Now, going to the next movement, um, we're gonna see something that is interesting in that the language of the music is gonna change a little bit. It's gonna be less tonal, as we musicians say. It's gonna be a little bit different. I call it an ear cleansing. You get these different phrases, these different melodies,
Yeah.
because if it's all too sweet or all done the same,
Mm.
your ear can get used to the sweetness,
Yeah.
used to the niceness of the sound, and then you don't appreciate as much. I think I think
Well,
that's
especially in a large piece of many movements, there has to be a good bit of contrast. And this movement has more contrast than just about anything, which, as you say, not only serves as an ear cleansing, it also allows the final movement to be to deliver a joyful conclusion to all of this.
right. And yeah, the last movement has its own things, its own difficulties. But this one, the difficulty is in tuning, in keeping yourself tuned to the melodies, because the melodies are not based on the normal patterns. I recently sang in a choir, and I realized how the whole singing was based on the major and minor scales and the normal intervals on those scales, and just how the ear of the singers is trained like that. The good thing about this is that the burden was on the soloists. The
Right.
soloists had
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It wasn't the choir, because it would have been a lot more complicated to burden the choir with this type of singing. But the soloists came up very nicely.
Yeah, and I think as a composer, it needs to be that way, because if the whole group is singing in a dissonant fashion, then especially the story, the words, and so forth, it's harder for the audience to understand that. And this piece needs to be understood.
Yeah, that's why I try to get everything that I do with subtitles or super titles in the Los Angeles Master Chorale puts super titles every time they sing anything on any language.
Right.
And it's very important, because sometimes, even though you try, the distortion of the singing sometimes obscures the words.
Yeah.
Even when everybody's singing the same word and everybody's together and everything, even then sometimes you cannot hear it.
Right.
So in a historic piece like this, it's very important that people get the words more than in normal other pieces.
So here we go with the fourth movement, where Herzl is struggling to bring his vision to reality.
The Jewish state caused a brief stir in Vienna. The reaction was shock. Herzl traveled to Constantinople to try to acquire land for the Jewish settlement, but the Sultan did not receive him. Edmund de Rothschild did not help him. Negotiations with Turkey were stalled, but his name had become known, and he convened the first Zionist Congress to push the movement forward. It was to be a black tie affair, a true representation of a Jewish Congress in exile.
We want to lay the cornerstone of the edifice that shall house the Jewish nation. From time immemorial, the world has been misinformed about us. Zionism is our return to Judaism, even before our return to our Jewish land. Our Congress shall be worthy of the Jewish past, whose glory is indeed distant, but which will never be dimmed. Zionism seeks to establish a home for the Jewish people in Palestine under public law. The Congress contemplates the following needs to the attainment of that promoting the settlement of Jewish artisans, farmers, manufacturers, organizing in Zion itself, Imesh Kochech Yerushalayim, Imesh Ach Yemini, Imesh Kochech.
All right, so that's the end of the Herzl participation
Mm.
in the work. We are heading to the last movement, which is called the Pioneers, and it's the story of the people that came and actually did the work. When I was planning this work, I said that's gonna be the easy one. I'm just gonna do a kind of a mix of pioneer songs, you know. And I started looking for the pioneer songs and everything, and then I said, no, no, that's not gonna do it. And then I started reading books. I read about 7 books about the pioneers, and I found so much material there. And I said, no, I have to tell their story. It's a story worth telling. And so you have texts from A.D. Gordon. You have texts from Mukitsur, who is the foremost expert in kibbutzim in Israel, academically. He sent me 10 letters of pioneers in Hebrew. I had to, translate, and I chose one from a wedding in 1912 because it was such an example of how Arabs and Jews can live in harmony. It was such a nice illustration of, this is not an intrinsic fight. It's not a inevitable fight. You know, we can be together, and I chose that for that reason. And then I chose other things, you know, in papers, newspapers, and headlines, and the whole story. And the other thing that was delicate is just before the state of Israel was formed, we had the Holocaust.
Yeah.
So it's how do you get that there? So I did a couple of things. You'll see what I did to include it in the story, but basically we're going to a joyous moment. So, but we had to mention it somehow. So that's what this movement is about.
Yeah, and this one, of course, becomes much more tonal and so forth. But at the same time, as you point out, it's within this part of the story that the Holocaust gets its mention, and it all pretty much has to be mentioned. And you did a very interesting thing in terms of the way the piece works out, is that there becomes an absolute, that there's one chord, and it's almost like the world stops.
I got that from the sirens that they have in Israel.
Ah, uh-huh.
In there is a day of remembrance in Israel about the Holocaust, and what happens is there is sirens that sound all over the country, and everything stops for 2 minutes. Everybody, the freeway stops, everybody stops, and you have 2 minutes of silence. And then the siren rings again, and everybody resumes.
Yeah.
So I took that siren and I put it there, and then the siren, and then a little bit of nothing, and then we continue the story because it's such a huge parenthesis, but it has to be included there. That's why you had those two tones that just, it's one chord, as you said.
Yeah.
That's it for a couple of minutes.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, and then basically it builds, and it builds not so much to a glorious ending, but really a satisfied and real ending. There's a sense that this has happened. His dream was achieved,
Mm-hmm.
and and I think we can just sort of simply be glad.
Yes. Yeah. And I wanted to go back a little bit to the production before we enter the last movement.
Yeah.
If you can, there's going to be a URL on the bottom of the screen of where you can donate. Okay. So I'll there's going to be a QR code at the bottom of the screen, so you can put your contribution there, and we really encourage you, because these things take resources, as you can see, to perform and to get it out there. Get these stories done. It's also, as you said, taking a chance on new works takes resources, and so I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, this sort of thing, there are many choirs that can sing well and that will present lovely pieces, but this choir does that in other concerts, but also has the will and the capacity to take on the challenge of doing a new work that's not simply a small piece. This is a major piece, and this is a rare group that can do that and does do that.
Yeah, I mentioned there is a particular difficulty to this movement, and there is a moment that the men start just enumerating all the settlements that were created in Israel in chronological order, and it was important to see the magnitude of the creation that was taking place, of one after another and after another, and they are in a little bit of a different key than what the women are expressing, and that was just before we get into the trouble thing. So I didn't want to do something very joyous we have a section on Tel Aviv that is joyous, but there is this underground that is a little bit dissonant, a little bit not quite there, because we're going to the Holocaust. So to go through the Holocaust, so it had to be a little bit of dissonance somewhere. There had to be something that wasn't totally right, because it wasn't totally right.
Yeah.
It was 1933 when the piece about Tel Aviv, when the essay about Tel Aviv was written, and 33 is when the Germany, the rise to power of of the Nazi Party and stuff, and so while we were having these things happening, there was something else happening in another part of the world, and it had to be somehow introduced. And so if it sounds a little bit dissonant to you, it's on purpose. The choir didn't mess up. I put it there, and for a reason. And sometimes you have to say that, because they say, "Oh, they sounded good all time, but why in these 3 minutes?" Well, because the composer wanted them to, Anyway, and they did it. It comes out right, I think, in the end.
So let's hear it. The finale of this fabulous piece.
But Herzl, like Moses, would not live to see his work finished. He passed away 1 year later in 1904 at age 44. However, Jews had started to arrive at the Beirut Vilayet and the Mutasarrifate of Jerusalem of the Ottoman Empire since 1881, victims of oppressive laws, pogroms, economic hardship, and persecution in Eastern Europe and Yemen. It required a special kind of person, a committed idealist, to transform the land and to endure the weather, the poverty, and the malaria. Many people attempted the trip and returned to their places of origin, but many chalutzim and chalutzot were up to the task.
I must leave this country. I am sick of I'm going to stay where Sinai was done. I'm going to stay where sisters were. I'm going to stay where of Teshvan. The guests arrived on foot, on a horse, or by boat. You could hear them from afar, approaching with guitars, with mandolins and melodies and melodies. They brought a barrel of wine from Tiberias. Everyone came over and toasted together. L'chaim, l'chaim, to life. The sheiks and defenders were invited. There were horses that lasted 2 days. The Arab neighbors joined the celebration. They fired plenty of shots in the air. The yard was full with carts, and the people lay down to rest underneath. A rabble arrived from Tiberias, and we set up a
But Herzl, like Moses, would not live to see his work finished. He passed away 1 year later in 1904 at age 44. However, Jews had started to arrive at the Beirut Vilayet and the Mutasarrifate of Jerusalem of the Ottoman Empire since 1881, victims of a
Okay.
And here is the conclusion.
So
But Herzl,
applaud.
like Moses, would not live to see his work finished. He passed away 1 year later in 1904 at age 44. However, Jews had started to arrive at the Beirut Vilayet and the Mutasarrifate of Jerusalem of the Ottoman Empire since 1881, victims of oppressive laws, pogroms, economic hardship, and persecution in Eastern Europe and Yemen. It required a special kind of person, a committed idealist, to transform the land.
Well, we hope you have enjoyed this special presentation of Sergio Barrera's piece, and we do hope as well that if it has moved you, if it has entertained you, if you have enjoyed all of this, please do consider donating to support the choir and all of the other work that we do.
Right. This has been a very special production. It took actually a couple of years from the time it was finished to be able to actually schedule it because of all the logistic difficulties that this entailed. The amount of rehearsal time that was needed, getting the choir in the right place, you know, the whole getting the schedule of the season right. So, you know, the project started in 2017. So you get the idea of how much these projects do cost, and in time and in resources.
Yeah.
So there is the possibility of doing that. I want to thank Marcus Feldman, our main soloist, and Charlie Kim, our conductor, for their. And I want to thank Bob here because he was there every rehearsal. I mean, without Bob, this wouldn't have happened either. He's a great accompanist and a great friend, and we all would love working with Bob.
Thank you.
Whenever we have a chance, which is every time. and any last words before we end this?
Please join us for our upcoming season. There's plenty more excitement and beautiful music to come.
Find it, go to sfbmc.com.
To find out more, yes,
Go to
sfvmc.com.
just remember those are the initials of the San Fernando Valley Master Chorale. If you don't remember, sanfernandovalleymasterchorale.com, sfvmc.com.